this computer just in case some people are having a hard time joining the Zoom. I've got some feedback about that lately that there's some people who just can't join the Zoom and I don't know why. I do
Professor
see
Lau,
other, yes, go ahead.
I think you've mentioned this before, but if I type on my setup, you can hear me, right? Like it's really loud.
I don't remember. I think occasionally that's an issue, but I don't particularly remember that with you.
Can you hear this?
Yeah, I can hear that.
Okay, I'm just asking because like I have other Zoom classes and
I
I don't
see.
want to be
Yeah.
annoying.
So I mean, well, it's up to you. You can mute yourself unless when you want to speak. I really encourage people to participate in any sort of discussion. So I mean, I don't mind if you're muted up until the point where you want to say something, and then you can unmute yourself. That's fine too. Also, I know some people have noises in the background, and I think it's the polite thing to do is mute yourself if there's some kind of noise that you can't do anything about. So yeah, no issues there. I do want to say that what I asked you to watch were these videos that were all kind of about consumer choice anomalies, um, the illusion of free choice, decoy effect, mental accounting, and arbitrary coherence. They're all related, and a lot of the stuff I get is based on this book, Predictably Irrational. Yeah. So if you do have this book, um, you can really like see a lot of what I get from chapter 2, the fallacy of supply and demand. And what does Dan Ariely mean by the fallacy of supply? How can you say supply and demand fallacy? That's like the foundation of economics. How that can't be a fallacy? What he means is that it doesn't work exactly the way we think it works. There's more to it, especially because when people make decisions about consumption, their supply and their demand, um, their brains just sometimes just want to take the easy way out. We're not computers that can process and analyze data really quick, really fast, and you know being optimized. Be these agents who consider all the options, figure out which one's optimal, and choose that one. A computer might be able to do that efficiently, but the human brain can't. And because of that, there are some effects, and that's kind of what this group of videos was about. Did you guys have any comments, anything you agreed or disagreed with in from my videos, or maybe even some other examples that weren't talked about that you thought of? If you want to share, you can. Some people still coming in. Want to allow them to enter the room. If not, anyone has any comments? If not, we can just talk about them briefly. I will assume that you've watched the videos. So when we have our next quiz, today's Wednesday. I think I want to have our next quiz a week from today. So quiz 3 will be Wednesday, September 30th. And then the very next week after that will be our midterm. So today is a Wednesday. Next Wednesday is a quiz. The next Wednesday is a midterm exam. And the midterm exam will be during class.
Next Wednesday's quiz exclusively on those videos we watched?
No. It'll be on everything since the last quiz until that class. So anything we talk about today, anything we talk about Monday. I'm actually thinking of having Monday being asynchronous, but that would sort of make it tough for you to quiz. So let me ask, do you want to make sure that you have some time to interact with me before the quiz, before anything that I'm gonna ask you about?
Can we have Monday be an optional like review question day? We can come in with questions.
I suppose Yeah, but I mean, we have new material that we have to cover. So we're gonna cover new material, whether or not I grant your request. The
Okay.
question is, should it be an asynchronous lesson that you watch videos for and then we meet? I kind of think we should. Here's what I'll do. I'll make it so rather than just saying no class Monday and only watch videos, I think there's some people, and James, you may be included in this set of people who would not like that because then you wouldn't have this time to ask questions and interact with me before the quiz. I mean, maybe you would do it on Wednesday, but not like a full class period before that. And I get that. So I'll make it half synchronous, half asynchronous. So we'll have a shortened class on Monday, and I will give you some videos I'll ask you to watch. I'll just tell you now, the videos will be about prospect theory. So after we're done talking today, let me go to the chat. Just like if I were writing something on the board, I will type it in the chat. Today we will finish this consumer choice anomaly stuff and start a big section on prospect theory. And so for Monday, I'll give you some prospect. I'll actually have a paper I'll ask you to read. I'll give you some prospect theory videos and an article to read, but it won't be completely asynchronous in the sense that, I'm sorry, some people are still coming. I have to admit them. Okay. Where was I? For Monday, I'll give you some prospect theory videos to watch and an article to read, but it won't be totally asynchronous because I'll still be here. Maybe it's kind of an optional thing for you to come, but I will still be here to talk about that stuff. Talk about the stuff that you would have watched in the videos. Okay? And then on Wednesday, then we'll have more lecture, but also a quiz. And the quiz will be over everything that is past what was covered on quiz 2 up until Monday. Okay? So nothing from like the day of. I'm not going to teach you something on next Wednesday, and then say, okay, now you're responsible for this on the quiz 2. I won't do that. Quiz also. I will actually be more specific in a Blackboard announcement what topics could be on quiz 3, just so you know ahead of time. But let me finish typing this chat. For Monday, I'll give you some prospect videos and articles to read. And we will have an in person, it's not in person. We will still have a Zoom lecture, but in some sense, optional because it will cover the material from the videos. I mean, I'll recommend it, but but okay. There you go. Okay. Everyone understand what is happening for the next 2 weeks of this class? So James, I think maybe you're interested in having some kind of a review. Let's not do that for the quiz. Let's do that for the midterm. Maybe that's what you meant. Is that what you were talking about?
No, but that is a better idea.
Yeah. So the midterm is worth way more as a percentage of your grade. Remember, you get to drop the lowest quiz too. So if you've had a bad quiz, maybe your expectations weren't quite met or what you thought was going to be on the quiz or something, you had a bad day, you can have your lowest quiz grade dropped. And it will automatically happen. And we'll probably have 6 quizzes this semester, 3 before the midterm, 3 after, and I'll just take the top 5 scores on your quizzes, and that will be your quiz grade. So quiz grades matter a lot too. There's only 5 of them that are going to count. So obviously, prepare yourself for the quizzes. But the midterm is actually a much bigger percentage of your grade, and that's going to be a timed exam. I think maybe some of you don't like having time restrictions on your exams, but this is an open book, open note, open computer exam, and I really do think that if this were unlimited in time, um, I would have to write the questions pretty hard. I would have to write the questions in such a way that I'm testing your understanding of the material on a deeper level than just you could get by opening my slides and reading them, or typing a question into Google and getting the answer from Google, right? So actually, I think you don't want that either. Just have this really complicated and in-depth questions on the exam. I'd rather do some kind of compromise where I'm asking you questions that deal with the material, and some of them are just dealing with the material on a superficial way. Do you know what the endowment effect is? That's basically what I'll be asking. Now, of course, if you've never attended any of my Zoom lectures or watched any of my videos or done any preparation at all, you could still answer this question, what is the endowment effect, just by looking it up. And I realized that, and what are we going to do? That's the situation we find ourselves in. However, I do want to limit the time so that if you're don't know anything coming into the exam and you have to look everything up, then the time actually will be somewhat of an issue in the sense that I do want you to think of this as a real exam that you're preparing for, and almost like you're checking yourself to see, do I really know all of the stuff that could be on the exam? And give you a chance to ask me about it too. Like, I know we talked a lot about arbitrary coherence, but I still don't really get what it means. Why should we care about arbitrary coherence? What is it? What kind of implications does it have? I want you to have a chance to ask me about that type of question before the exam, because if you're asking me during the exam, I'm going to have to say, well, I can't give you the answer to the exam. I can clarify the question, but I can't help you. That would be unfair to give you the answer. So because that's how the test format is going to be, 75 minutes, mixture of superficial questions and deeper questions. I do think it'd be nice to have a bit of a review on Monday. So to answer your question, James, let's not do a review for the quiz. I think you can review on yourself for the quiz. If you do have questions, you can ask me. And even if we want to have a little bit of a office hour, that's fine too. But I kind of have to do it by appointment. I'm not actually in my office like I would be in a normal semester. So plan for a bit of a review on not the next Monday, but the Monday after, the one right before the midterm. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And you guys have any other questions? I did wish that there would be some commentary you may have had over the 4 videos I had you watch. What was the first one? Illusion of free choice. I think that one basically boiled down to what I just said about how the human brain doesn't work like a computer to just consider all of its options, think about how much utility I would get from each option, and then choose the one which maximizes it. That's a nice model. That might be like a good kind of basic model for how things work. I think if you're interested in this stuff, there's so many good YouTube videos you could watch. Guys like Richard Thaler, when he has a new book that comes out, he's had a few books. One was Nudge, one was Misbehaving. He goes and does some press events for it. He also gives some academic talks, and he just has this overall idea of what behavioral economics is and how. In my class, I call it Homo economicus, and of course he refers to this term as well. but he abbreviates it. So Richard Thaler's term is econs. Like a type of person that's an econ is somebody who I would call Homo economicus, and then the other people are humans. So there are some humans and there are some econs, and thinking about the different ways in which they make decisions is just a big part of Richard Thaler's theories. And it often comes back to this idea that we just don't consider everything. We take the easy way out. So go ahead, and if you are interested in that, I recommend seeing some videos like that. Another person who talks about this a lot is Daniel Kahneman. Kahneman is the author of a lot of the papers I'm asking you to read. Well, Thaler was too, but Daniel Kahneman's still around and he's still giving talks. And one of his books is called Thinking Fast and Slow. So in his book, Thinking Fast and Slow, the main thesis of that book is there's two systems in our brain. So unlike Richard Thaler, where either you're an econ or a human, Kahneman's idea is more like every one of us has two systems. One is a thinking fast system. What do I see? What do I want? How do I feel about it? Just bam, thinking fast. And then we have a thinking slow system, which is deliberative, and it's costly. It takes effort for us to use our slow thinking system. And I think both of these theories are great. Both of these ways to think about human decision making and economic decision making are fantastic. And a lot of the videos that I made and asked you to watch are sort of based on this idea. Dan Ariely, also a guy, has these sorts of ideas that I'm borrowing from. You may know this about academia. We're always just borrowing other people's ideas. That's what we do. Unless we really are like at the top of our field and generating this stuff, it's largely it's a community activity almost to be in a group of academics who decide what makes the most sense for how to think about the world. Okay, let's go back and share my screen of consumer choice anomalies and enable editing. Oops. I always hate looking back at myself. If I make a video of myself and I look back at what I was doing, while trying to share the right screen or enable something, I always look kind of like a doofus. Okay, wait a second. Am I doing that right now? Can you see it? Consumer choice anomalies. Share. You can see it, right? You guys see this on the screen? Which blue circle is bigger? You see it on your screen?
Yep.
Which blue circle is bigger? The one on the left, the one on the right?
They are the same size.
How do you know they're the same size?
It looks exactly like an example of we were given in environmental economics, but yeah. I guess it's just like a exercise on perspective and relative size.
Yep.
I think the difference is like when we were talking about it in environmental economics, it was more or less on the topic of what is fair versus what is like equitable. And you're trying to, and like, I can't remember the term, but it was like trying to make another group better off without making another group worse off and using resources efficiently.
Okay.
And so although you have two circles that are, one circle is smaller, but one circle is bigger, and the letters A, B, and C are in each circle, but one circle has a larger portion of A and B, and C is smaller. That one's not fair, but all the resources are.
It sounds like this class went way deeper into the how big is the circle metaphor than I.
It was really drawn out.
I'm not going to go deep into this. I'm not going to analogize and metaphor what exactly the size of these circles mean to people in terms of fairness and equity. I'm not going to go that far. I just want just quickly asking, like, which one looks bigger? Which one looks bigger? How about that? The one on the left or the one on the right? The blue on the left-hand side, it looks bigger. That's right, Tony. I mean, at least it does to me. If you measure it, though, they are the same, and I'm sure you guys have seen this stuff before. Yeah, thanks, Daryl. The one on the left looks bigger. Okay, so what's my point here? We're sort of hardwired to think in relative terms. Every time we sort of judge something, we analyze something, we consider how big or how valuable something is. It's thinking in relative terms. And the blue circle on the left, relative to the ones around it, looks awfully big. The blue circle on the right, relative to the ones around it, looks pretty small. And so that effect is real. I can argue that this is for a lot of things, of all animals. If you're talking about like temperature and the way you feel temperature, a lot of times it's the relative change that you feel, or just how sensitive you are to that, or how bright something is. You get used to a certain level of brightness, and then it gets brighter. You feel that change in the brightness, the relative brightness, or like how sugary something is. You drink a lot of some sodas or juices or something that has a certain level of sugar. If you go to one that has even more, you really notice this relative change. This is just one idea that goes to the consumer choice anomalies. We're not thinking of things in absolute terms. When we get this particular product, do you want to buy it? You're thinking, well, how does that compare to other products that I could buy? When really it should be irrelevant. So the illusion of free choice, it's all of these things. Thinking is costly. Like Daniel Kahneman says, we have thinking fast and thinking slow. We'd rather not do the thinking slow. The thinking slow is kind of unpleasant. I mean, not for everybody. Some people like doing puzzles. Some people like really exploring the thought process itself. But I would say most people, if they can just think fast about something and use that system, it's better for them. They'd rather do that than thinking slow. So this idea of relativity, this idea of it's costly to think about things, it affects what we choose when we're faced with consumer products. And let's talk about some ways about that. The chapter 1, not chapter 2, but chapter 1 of the Dan Ariely Predictably Irrational book, this one, is about the truth about relativity, how things are relative to each other. I've already given you plenty of examples of the anchoring effect. So let's just go on. Did you see this? How many of you, if you had to choose, both prices seem high to me, but if you had to choose an Economist subscription between online only for $59 or print and web for 125, that might be a hard decision, right? You'll have to think about how valuable is the print and web versus just the online only. How much are you going to use these printed versions of The Economist? This is the experiment. Hopefully you already read it. You already watched me talk about this. But I didn't get as any feedback from you. Did any of you actually not fall for this, but think to yourself, you know what? I probably would have done the same thing. Here's what I mean by the same thing. It's on the two options that I have on the screen. When you're faced between those, you go with the online only option. You go with, looking at those two, I think I would pick the $59 option, online only. And then if you looked at these three options, if instead you were presented with these three options, you would say, I want the print and web subscription for $125. What I'm asking is, can any of you take a good, honest look at yourselves and the way you make decisions and realize, yeah, I probably would have been one of those people where if I had these two options, I would pick the cheaper one. Just cheaper, the cheaper option seems better. But if I were given these three options, I might think to myself, you know what, it's worth it to get the print and the web, even though it's more expensive than the online only. Um, it just seems like a really good deal because I'm getting the print subscription is worth 125, the online is worth 59. I'm getting both of those. That's like worth 125 plus 59. I don't know what number that is. It's 184 dollars, but I'm getting it for only 125. That seems like a good deal.
I've definitely fallen for that. Amazon uses that tactic a lot.
Amazon uses it. They're smart, right?
Mm-hmm.
They understand.
But at the same time, New York Times did the same thing. It was like the exact same thing, and I only have the digital subscription because it's the cheapest. So
yeah,
I don't know. Not 100%.
Great. Here's another thing to remember. Dan Ariely did this like 10, 15 years ago. And I think the way we consume media has changed since then. I don't know about you guys, but I'm like almost entirely online. I don't look for newspapers or magazines in their print form anymore. I don't use that. We have our phones, our iPads, our computers. That's how we consume media for the most part now. But maybe 15 years ago, there was still more of a practical use for print. So not only do you have to think of yourself hypothetically, if I had seen this or if I had just seen this, you also have to think of yourself as 15 years ago and not having so many gadgets that we just rely on for everything. But yeah, that's a great point. And do you guys see why this is the decoy effect? What's the decoy? Of these three that I have on the screen here, the top one, the middle one, the bottom one, which one's the decoy?
Middle one.
The middle one. Somebody said middle one very quietly, but that's correct. Yes, and someone chatted it. The middle one is the decoy because it's obviously worse than the bottom one. That's what I want you guys to see. You should have gotten from this video. What makes something a decoy isn't that it's just a bad option. That's not it. You can't just like throw in any old crappy thing in your set of choices and that somehow makes people buy the thing you want them to buy. It's about how easy to compare between the two other choices. And it's real easy to compare the middle one to the bottom one. It's real easy to compare the middle one to the bottom. The bottom one's obviously better. But it's not so easy to compare the middle one to the top one. That one's tough. So that's exactly why it's a decoy. The decoy effect only works when there's another option that's easily and obviously better, and it makes you want to pick the one that's easily and obviously better. Somebody raised their hand here. Who would like to speak? Go ahead if you'd like to. Oh, James and Sierra, go ahead.
Say someone asked a question. Would this be an example of a preference reversal? And I was just curious.
What do you guys think? Would this be an example of a preference reversal? Unfortunately, I think no. I have to say no to that. I'm grateful for the question because it speaks to what a preference reversal actually is. Remember, I'm not saying the same person would sort of change their mind if they saw this versus if they saw this. I'm saying whether you saw this or this affects your decision. If you see it with the decoy, you might choose one thing. You should see it without the decoy, you might choose something else. And I don't think that counts as a preference reversal in the terms of behavioral economics because that's already reserved for something pretty specific, which is the way in which you evaluate something affects what your preference ordering appears to be, rather than the presence of a decoy affects what your preferences turn to be. So let me try to sum it up. Yes, it is true that you're reversing the preference between the top and the bottom. It is reversed. I still wouldn't call it a preference reversal because that name is reserved for one specific thing in economics. So good question. Did I answer the other person who had their hand up's question? Yo, Alexandria, mute yourself. The Sierra. I don't know if the yo is meant to be endearing or accusatory, like hey yo or yo. You can't tell with chat. Very endearing, says Sierra. Okay, he meant it in the nicest possible way. Okay, I basically think we're done with the decoy effect. And here's more about it. I think did I in the video did I talk about the one with the faces, the experiment that Dan Ariely did with people's faces? Did I mention that in the video? I think I did. I love how this is recorded. What do you mean? Oh, how everyone's, oh, my discourse on the endearing usage of the word yo. I don't remember the faces. Peter, you watched the decoy effect video and I didn't talk about the faces. Okay, good. I have something I can tell you about right now. And it's really creepy. Prepare to get creeped out. And yes, I'm going to put this on video, and I'll probably put it on YouTube, and everyone is going to think I'm the creep for doing this experiment, or at least talking about the experiment. But it wasn't me. It was Dan Ariely. I refer all viewers of this YouTube video to Dan Ariely and his conducting this experiment. Here's the experiment. He took real college students' faces, pictures of their faces, and so first of all, he just takes their real faces, but like two college men, and asked women. I think he pretty much assumed he was very heteronormative, I believe, in this study, to say he asked women which of these two men is more attractive, and that was it at first. So he got all this data about the relative attractiveness of people's faces and kept that data. So he had an idea of how likely, between these two, how many women would selected the first guy A, how many selected the second guy B on average. Then he did another treatment, which was to take somebody's face, take a picture of their face, and distort it somehow. Like, you guys ever seen the movie Goonies? There's a guy named Sloth, and I think they just sort of adjusted the guy's face in some way. That's kind of like what Dan Ariely did, was like more like disfigure the face of the person. So, and now they went through the same process of asking for, so now instead of two pictures of two men, it was two pictures of two different men and a third picture of one of the men that was disfigured in some way, like his, their eyeball was really big or something, or nose moving to the left. And then they asked women, which one do you think is the most attractive now? Which face do you think is the best looking? And there was this effect. There was a decoy effect. What do you guys think the effect was? What would the decoy effect be according to applied to faces and how attractive people look? What was the decoy? Obviously, the disfigured face was the decoy.
So the original picture was then preferred strongly?
The picture of the person whose face was disfigured was preferred to the person who didn't have a disfigured face also shown. Does that make sense? Do you see why this is the decoy effect? Because you can look at somebody's face and say it's obviously better than the version of their face which is disfigured. I mean, that's an easy comparison. Whereas it's not so easy to compare the disfigured face of one person to the regular undisfigured face of the other person. So just like with the online and print subscription of The Economist, which looks better when you compare it to just a print-only version at the same price, that decoy effect, it works on some psychological subconscious level when we're thinking of how attractive partners might be. That was in 1999 that he did that. But this is some guys are like, yeah, I know this. This is why I have wingmen. I choose an ugly person as my wingman so that I look better when they go to a bar or a club. I don't know. I haven't been, you know, single in over 20 years or something. So I don't know what it's like dating, but and you probably all use apps now, like, I don't know, Tinder. You don't need a wingman if you have Tinder. So everything's changed, but you could argue that there was this conventional wisdom in the past that you want a wingman who kind of looks like you, but not quite as good. That'll make you, by comparison, look good. Is that a flex? What, the fact that I'm old and married, is that a flex? That you guys are actually closer in age to my children than you are to me? I don't know if that makes me feel good. You know, my daughter's in 7th grade right now. That's crazy. Okay. Yeah, so that's kind of the idea I'm conveying is just how strong the decoy effect is and how much it happens without us realizing. Obviously, the women who were making these decisions, actually, I think he did it both ways. I think he also took women's pictures and showed them to men. Now I don't remember. But the point is, it works without us realizing it. I don't think any of us would be like, well, because that guy has a disfigured face, I'm going to choose that guy. That doesn't make any sense. But is this bright light from my window bothering people? Yeah. Maybe that's better. I'll just move back a little. Okay, let's go on. Mental accounting. What do you guys think of this one? Here's one that I think actually for a lot of people, especially people who've taken economics, it doesn't work for. I've had in-person classes a lot where if you watch this video, I tell a story about losing $10 out of your wallet versus losing a $10 movie ticket, and in which case would you be more likely to go ahead and buy the ticket again? And the theory of mental accounting says that we code, characterize, and evaluate our consumer choices, and we have some restraint. We basically constrain ourselves not to spend too much in any type of spending. And that's what the accounting is. We make a mental account of all of our choices and our spending. If that's true, then if we've lost some money because of, if we've lost money out of our wallet that we haven't decided yet how to spend, then we're still just as likely to want to buy a movie ticket. However, if we've already paid money for a movie ticket, and then we lose it, we don't want to buy the same movie ticket again because we've sort of characterized that level of spending. Like I can't spend any more on movie tickets. I guess I'll just do something else tonight. Does anybody sort of introspectively look at themselves and say, actually, I don't think I would fall for that? If so, I buy that because I feel like this one doesn't get you as much as the decoy effect does. I'm not saying it's a bad theory. I mean, why would I teach it to you if I thought it was a bad theory? I think it can apply in some grander sense of, here's the theory, and this is, once again, this is Richard Thaler now, not Kahneman. So Thaler thinks that there's different types of people. Some people are econs and some people are humans. Actually, most people are humans. But the econ model is to consider every possible choice of consumption and pick among the best ones. Whereas the human will sort of categorize their consumption and say, there's certain things I can't do. I won't even consider spending a lot on this certain thing. Like, for example, fine dining can be really expensive. If you want to go out to a nice place to eat, you spend over $100 just for two people to eat a meal. You may be thinking to yourself, I can't let myself go out to too many nice dinners. I've already done it, you know, twice this month, so I just can't do it anymore. Why, psychologically, why are you doing this? Why are you constraining yourself about how you can spend your money? because the theory of economics and consumption is that you should always just spend your money however is best for you. If it happens to be that the best way to spend your money now is to go out to another really nice meal, you should do it according to an econ. Whereas a human says, actually, I've already met my limit if that's, so I have to stop. So it's a way to, so almost like a way to constrain yourself so that you don't do something too stupid. I think that makes sense, right? So that part I do buy. I don't think the movie ticket thing works on people, but I do think this sort of, I can't buy this. I've already done that. Or man, I should buy some more of this because I haven't bought any of it yet. I haven't bought new clothes in 6 months. I got to buy some new clothes. You know, why? why should you think you're supposed to do something when it comes to spending? This is a free country. This is America. You can decide how to spend your money however you want. Okay. So that's called the theory of mental accounting, which you should have already watched a video about. Any other comments about that? Let's go on. Fallacy of supply and demand. I've already given you this case with the Pearl King. It's an interesting excerpt from this book because it really shows how somebody can make a fortune using these concepts. Of course, we can't all be a Pearl King. Like why am I not a millionaire Pearl King as well? It's because he had certain connections that allowed him to do that. He had this opportunity that other people didn't have, which was to be somebody who imports pearls from the South Pacific and already had a way to do that. His idea was, people don't know what the price of this should be. They have no experience with this product. So if I imprint them with this high, I'm using imprinting because I'm going to be talking about arbitrary coherence in a bit, which is the last video. And that idea is this: first you imprint something with how much it's worth, and then further on you're coherent. You have a normal looking demand. So that was part of this point. What else did we talk about? Anchoring for selling. Did I mention this in the video? I did. I remember watching this video recently and thinking, oh, I do mention it, but real briefly. So I think in class, this is the idea. You watch the videos and then I give you a little bit deeper dive in class. And if it's a discussion, great. If you have some question or comment, please give it. But imagine you're a student in Dan Ariely's class, and he picks up a book of like old poetry, I don't know, maybe 1700s or something. And he just starts reading it. He's trying his best to sort of make it an interesting, maybe it's somehow moving in some way, some nice piece of poetry. But after all, it is just poetry, and you're sitting there listening to him read poetry. I don't know if you guys have ever been to a poetry reading before, but they exist. People go places specifically to hear poetry being read. Okay, so the question is this a good or a bad? Do you guys know what a bad is? Economists talk about goods all the time. You hear this: goods and services. We have a demand for goods. Goods are items, products that we want. We want more of those things. Therefore, they're called goods. There's exactly something on the opposite side of that, which are bads. A bad is just something you want less of. Something that, if there's some item, something that exists in your world, and you would like to have less and less and less of it, the less you have, the better. That's called a bad. It's the opposite of a good. An easy thing that's a bad is like garbage, right? Garbage is a bad. If you could have less garbage in your world, in your house, that's a good thing. Pollution is a bad. Noises are bads. If next door to you there's a jackhammer just going constantly, that's something you would want less of. You might even be willing to pay to have less of that bad. Okay, I think I've explained what a bad is. Still don't know what a bad is? Watch a video, watch it again. But here's the thing that Dan Ariely did that I thought was really clever. He made his poetry reading a good for some of his classes. Yeah, but he also made it a bad for some other of his classes. And these are the only difference between the classes is what section you happen to be in. So it's pretty much like a randomization. Who happens to be in this section of the class versus this section of the class? It's the same class. And the way he did it was by imprinting. Just like Salvador Assail did by imprinting the consumers of black pearls to think that they're valuable gems and they're worth a lot of money. What time is it? 1:19. We go to 1:45. Interrupt me though if you have anything to say. I like this story. I like to tell this story to my students because if it's told right and if you agree with me, it can sort of change the whole way that we think about consumers having demand for goods. Is a good, we want more of it, we have a demand. Well, what if something is not just, it's not a good, it could actually be a bad. And the only thing that determines that is whether it's, when it's first presented to you, it's something that you have to pay to get. If you want more of this thing, you have to pay for it. That imprints it in your mind as a good. What if it's the opposite? There's a poetry reading and I have to pay you to go there. You're like, yeah, you may not want to go to this poetry reading, but I want as many people to come as possible. And I'll give you some money just for showing up and being part of this audience of the poetry reading. Already it's being imprinted into your mind as something that you'd rather not do. It's, you know, it's something that you have to be paid in order to do. And of course, we can almost, now we can look back and say, yeah, that makes sense. If I think of it as a good, I'll have to pay more to get more of it. I may have diminishing returns to the good. So if you have a 1 minute poetry reading versus a 10-minute, it's not going to be, you know, worth 10 times as much for the 10-minute as it is for the one because of diminishing returns. But maybe I think of the 10-minute poetry reading is better than the 1 minute. Whereas if it's a bad, the same is true. You'd have to pay more for me to stick around for a 10-minute poetry reading than you would for a 1 minute. And that's what he found. So if you're interested in seeing more about that, you know, check out the book or check out his paper that talks about it. Apparently goslings, baby geese, are very much like this in terms of being imprinted. The first experiences that they have when they come out of their shells, you know, they can get imprinted. And I actually think they could be confused over who their mother is. Like if it's some other animal, they might think that's their mother. I don't know. I don't have a lot of experience with that. Okay, let's go on. And that this all combines to the idea of arbitrary coherence, that you initially could have malleable preferences. You guys understand the word malleable? It really doesn't mean flimsy. It doesn't mean like non-existent, but it's still there. But malleable means like I can bend it, I can shape it in just the way that I want, in just the way that the Pearl King shaped your preferences into thinking that black pearls are precious gems. There were some malleable preferences at first, but once they've been imprinted, then they look just like the theory of the normal standard economic theory. And that's why we shouldn't throw away economic theory. It makes sense. When price goes down, quantity demanded goes up. That's the theory of demand. We have to keep that theory. Right? There's some goods that are elastic, some goods that are inelastic, and that's a good theory too. That's about how responsive people are to changes in price. What's an inelastic good? Gasoline is pretty inelastic. When the price goes up, you may grumble about it. You're like, oh, stupid price of gas, but you still buy a lot of it. But other things are inelastic. because you can easily find substitutes for them. All of those theories are still good. Those are still good theories. And that's the point of arbitrary coherence, is that we still look like regular rational economic consumers once these preferences have been imprinted. Okay? I think that's it for the consumer choice anomalies. You guys have any questions about that? I sort of want to go on to the next thing. Any comments or questions? The next thing I would like you guys to look at, maybe I won't have you read the whole paper start to finish, but the thing I want you to read is the original paper on prospect theory. And that was written by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, published in 1979, I believe. And still an important paper. Even though I would say prospect theory has been improved upon, behavioral economists, they wouldn't go back to this 1979 paper and say, yeah, that's it. We figured out all of there is to know about decision-making under uncertainty. Obviously, that's not true. But I do want you to have this sort of building block, this sort of the first major study done by two psychologists that show the way economists have been thinking about decision-making under uncertainty has these flaws, but in very predictable ways. And once again, it was a unifying theory. Remember their paper about biases and heuristics that Kahneman and Tversky wrote? They weren't coming up with a lot of new phenomena. On the contrary, they were trying to think of a theory that explained a lot of these existing phenomena. These things already existed, but they're gonna come up with a theory that explains it all. Same thing is true here with prospect theory. They're already aware of these certain bizarre things that happen. We're going to talk about, let me put this in the chat. We're going to talk about decision-making under uncertainty right now. That's the first thing we're going to get to. Decision-making under uncertainty, economists care about this a whole heck of a lot. When you make decisions, all the time, you don't have certainty over what's going to happen, do you? Even just something like, well, okay, major decisions that you made in your life. I can think of one, where to go to college. You had choices over where to go to college. You didn't have to enroll in VCU and be a VCU RAM. You had to make that decision not knowing what's going to happen in the future. You don't know what the job market is going to be like. Probably a lot of you are economics majors. You had to pick your major, not knowing what the job market's situation was going to be like for econ majors. Maybe you did it. Maybe you picked the wrong major. Uh-oh. You should have been an engineer or, gone into nursing or something. Here's my point. If we want to have a good theory of how people make decisions about anything, it has to include uncertainty. It has to include the way you process the fact that there's certain things about the future that you just can't know, yet you got to make a decision anyway. And you did. You chose to be a VCU student. You chose to be an economics major, probably. Not all of you, but most of you. So now I want to talk about what's the normal way, the standard economic way of thinking about choice under uncertainty. There's a theory that's still probably the most commonly used way to think about how people make decisions under uncertainty. You guys know what I'm talking about? EUT.
Expected utility, something?
Yeah, expected utility. I would call that a theory. You might say that's not a theory, that's just like a definition of expected utility. It actually is more than that, in my opinion, and I'll give you my opinion. I'm a professor, you're a student, you have to listen to my opinion. Sometimes you might not like it. But it actually is a model of how people address uncertainty in this fundamental way. The idea of expected utility And the reason I would call it not just expected utility, but expected utility theory, expected utility theory, is that people weight outcomes by multiplying utility times the probability that it will happen. That is it. That's the core. How's Peter not here? He must have left and now he's come back.
Sorry, I just got off the train and now I'm at my actual home so I can get on my computer.
Gotcha. Okay, so here's what I was talking about. What is this core assumption of expected utility theory is that when somebody is faced with some uncertainty, like you were when you were trying to decide, let's just do the major. You could have been an economics major, or you could have been, I don't know, an engineering major. The core assumption of expected utility theory is you value the outcome of a situation, of an uncertain, so the uncertainty of the outcome is incorporated into your decision making according to the probability that it happens times whatever payoff you get if it happens, or utility you get. So it's probability times payoff. That is a core assumption of expected utility theory. And in fact, it assumes that we are expected utility maximizers. We will choose the thing that gives us the highest expected utility. So let's go to slides. The slides of that are here. Let me share it. Okay, talking about expected utility theory now. By the way, expected utility theory is not part of behavioral economics. I don't want you to think that like this is something that behavioral economists have come up with. No, expected utility theory basically goes back to the 1950s. The 1950s, there were some economists and mathematicians, von Neumann, Morgenstern are their names, who really sort of put all of this together in terms of preferences and utility functions and probabilities, and said, here is a coherent theory of how people make decisions under uncertainty. And decades later, we basically refer to that as expected utility theory. So it's not part of behavioral economics, it's part of standard economics, but I still want you to know something about it because we're gonna talk about it in terms of prospect theory. So here's expected utility theory. Whenever you have some outcome that's uncertain, you can split it up into, I get outcome X with probability P, I get outcome Y with probability 1 minus P. That's what I have here in the second bullet point of this slide. And what does that mean? That means exactly, it just means there's no way, right now, there's no way to tell if I'm gonna get outcome X or outcome Y. But I do know the probability that I will. I get X with probability P, Y with 1 minus P. It has to be 1 minus P because you have to be able to add those two probabilities and equal 1. See, that's why P plus 1 minus P equals 1. Okay. Just for notation's sake, sometimes if there's an outcome that's either no change or is like a $0 change in your payoff, you can just leave that off. You can not include that in the way of writing this prospect. For example, prospect A. I'm using the word prospect to think of the set of all possible outcomes if I do this thing A. If I do A, what could happen to me? Okay, so let's just say, for example, prospect A is I gain, here's how you should read this with the parentheses. And by the way, this is the same way Kahneman and Tversky write prospects. So what I'm giving you right now is actually a primer for you to understand better the paper I'm asking you to read from Kahneman and Tversky. Here's how they write prospects. Prospect A, look down here, is $50, comma, 0.5, semicolon, negative $40, comma, 0.5. What does that mean? This is like a 50% chance of gaining $50 and a 50% chance of losing $40. That's what that prospect means. Okay, I'm not even going to say anything about it other than that's what it is. But prospects can also be, they don't just have to be dollars that you gain. It can be whether you're hired or not hired. And then prospect B, you have this thing where you're hired with probability 25%, but not 75%. Prospect C can be, for example, I wanted to give you one that was riskless. There's no probabilities in prospect C. That's okay. The way they will write that is just by dropping the probability altogether. Okay, so now let's talk about expected utility. If I have time, I do. It's the sum of the probabilities times the utilities of each outcome. So for example, getting outcome X with probability P, outcome Y with probability 1 minus P. The formula for expected utility is P times the utility of X. Remember, X could be any outcome. X could be, I become the bass player for Metallica. I would love being the bass player for Metallica. But whatever that outcome X is, I have certain utility associated with it, and that's the part that's in number. So just remember, X could be anything, but the utility of X has to be a number. It can't just be like a certain feeling, like I feel pretty good, or I don't feel so good. No, it has to be a number. Expected utility only works on numbers. And so how do I find expected utility? P times the utility of X plus 1 minus P times utility of Y. So I do want you to know that much about expected utility. That's how it works. Oh, by the way, what if there weren't just two outcomes, X and Y? What if there was a Z, X, Y, and Z? Could I do that too? Could I find the expected utility of three things? What would that look like? It's like a pop quiz. Pop quiz hotshot. That's from a 90s movie called Speed, which I'm sure none of you have seen. Dennis Hopper is the bad guy.
Excuse me, Mr. Leto.
Yes.
I have seen Speed. I'm gonna stop you right there.
Okay.
Huge
Not
Keanu
that young.
fan.
Yes. So you've heard of pop quiz hotshot.
Yes.
So here, if I gave you something that was like X with probability P, colon, or I meant semicolon, Y with probability Q, ooh, I'm using Q now, and Z with probability, it has to be 1 minus P minus Q. Okay? What would be the expected utility of that? All right, I'll type it now too. So you guys type it, and then I'll see if we get the same thing. It's a race to see who can type it the fastest. Also see if you understand it. The point of me asking you this other question is to show that expected utility is actually pretty broad. It doesn't just apply to a case where there's only two outcomes. It can apply to a case where there's a continuum of outcomes. That means infinite possible things could happen. And you might say, how can you have a probability associated with an infinite number of things? Okay, that's a little deeper into math. You might have a probability density function over every possible outcome. And then what you're actually doing is taking the integral of the utility of some outcome times its probability density integrated over all possible outcomes. I'm not going to ask you to do anything like that in this class. However, I do want you to have a broad enough concept of expected utility so that you could say, oh, it's not just if there's two outcomes, X and Y. There could be three outcomes, X, Y, and Z. And the same concept is still the same. The probability times the utility plus probability times utility plus probability times utility. Okay? No one typed it. I'll give you the answer. There's the answer. Right? P times U of X plus Q times U of Y plus 1 minus P minus Q times U of Z. This is the concept of expected utility. And it actually gets economists pretty far. If you want a theory of, lifetime savings, right? How do people save their income over the course of their whole lives? That's uncertain. You don't even know how long you're going to live. You don't know what your future income is going to be. But you know, you have this decision of I could either spend the money now or I could save it. All of that is done with models of uncertainty of the future, and expected utility is used. And I am a behavioral economist, and I want to go on the record as saying they should continue to use expected utility. Expected utility, for the most part, is a pretty darn good approximation of how people make decisions under uncertainty. So I'm not here to say this whole theory is crap. Don't even bother with it. I'm not saying that. But I will be saying, and Kahneman and Tversky will be saying in their paper, that there are these specific ways in which this theory is wrong. There's these specific attributes of the human mind which contradict this in certain ways. And because of that, we can do better. We can do better than expected utility theory. And the thing that they do, which is better, is called prospect theory. So I want us to be able to compare prospect theory to expected utility theory to sort of get in the minds of Kahneman and Tversky in the 1970s. They're thinking, what is it that's wrong about expected utility theory that we could improve on? Create a new theory which actually helps to solve some paradoxes. So I got to tell you about the paradoxes too. Some of you may already know there are these famous paradoxes. Is that the right way to pluralize the word paradox? That sort of don't make sense given expected utility theory. I can think of two, and actually more than two. I can think of more than two, but that's my job to be familiar with these things. And the beauty of prospect theory is that if we change expected utility in certain ways, then we can explain those paradoxes. Those paradoxes stop being paradoxes. They start being, well, yeah, that actually makes sense. That's how people would make decisions under uncertainty. That's how our brains work. This is what psychologists do. And this is why those particular psychologists won the Nobel Prize in economics. Or one of them did, the other one died, unfortunately. Okay, so we still have some minutes. Should I get into it? I mean, I have 4 minutes. Maybe go into it. Example. Oh, here's some expected utility examples. This is just a test. This is more just testing to see if you understand it. I don't think it's that important, but why not? I have a little bit of time here. If your utility function is the square root of x. So right now, remember how I said x could be anything? Let's say x is itself a number. You might think of it as your wealth. Think of x as your wealth right now. If your utility function is the square root of wealth, then my question is, what is expected utility of this first prospect of 1600, 0.7? You guys know how to read that? If you've been paying attention this lecture, I think you would. It means I get $1,600 with probability 70%. Well, what about, sorry, so what about the other 30% of the time? What happens? It's not, I don't say what happens. Assume it's zero, okay? So $1,600 with probability 70% and $0 with probability 30%. Can somebody actually find out what the expected utility is of that? You guys, can you do this calculation? So remember, u of x equals, this is something I would do on the board if I was with you in person, equals the square root of x, right? So what is the utility of 1600? Well, it's the square root of 1600. What's the square root of 1600? You might not know it, but it is 40. It's actually a nice round number. So what is the expected utility of getting 1600 with probability 0.7? Equal to 0.7 times the square root of 1600, which is 40, and 0.7 times 40 equals 28. Good job, Peter. Everyone see that? The expected utility of that prospect, the first prospect in the first bullet point, is actually 28. Thank you, that's correct. What's the expected utility of 900? Oops, 143. Expected utility of getting a certainty of 900 is equal to 30. Peter is correct again. Everyone see how he got that? He just took the square root of 900. Now, the third bullet point asks, which would the agent prefer? When I say an agent, I'm thinking about somebody who's making decisions. Do they want to get $1,600 with probability 0.7, or do they want to get 900 for sure? Peter says indifferent. Wrong. Sorry, Peter. You're usually right. That's why I felt I gave myself permission to say that you're wrong, because in this one case you are wrong. Which would the agent prefer? The first thing that gives him a utility, expected utility of 28, or the second thing, which gives him an expected utility of 30? Remember, the theory of expected utility is that you will choose the option which gives you the higher expected utility. One is 30, the other is 28. 30 is preferred, so yes. So the idea here is that somebody would rather have $900 for sure than, oh, sorry. No, I meant, which would the agent prefer among the two options above? And because 30 is higher than 28, he'd rather have 90. I would say this is an example of risk aversion. And I don't really have time to explain risk aversion, but risk aversion is when a decision maker prefers a sure amount to a gamble which has the same expected value, right? That's one way to think of risk aversion. It's when a decision maker prefers a sure amount to a gamble which has the same expected value. I would say this person has risk aversion, doesn't it? Because, sorry, let me just explain. The expected value of that first gamble of 1600, the expected value of it is 1600 times 0.7, which, oh shoot, I don't know what that is. But it's, what is 1600 times 0.7? 1120, right? That's the expected value of the first gamble. The expected value of the second one is 900. You actually expect to get more money from the 1600 gamble than from the 900 sure thing. Yet, but this person would actually prefer the sure thing. That's risk aversion, okay? So I gave you an example of somebody who is risk averse. Wait, isn't the expected value the utility function output, not the nominal value of x? No. So let me answer this. When we are testing for risk aversion right now, not expected utility, but risk aversion, we have to consider the true expected value of the gamble, okay? So the true expected value of the gamble doesn't have anything to do with utility functions. It only has to do with how much money you would actually expect to get from this gamble. And for the first gamble, it's $1,100. Whereas the second choice, you only get $900. So here's the reason I brought this up. This utility function, combined with expected utility theory, is an explanation for why people are risk averse. And actually, you know what? It's a pretty good one. I'm not gonna complain about it. Risk aversion can be explained for large stakes gambles. It can explain people's risk aversion relatively well. What I'm going to show you in the video that I'll ask you to watch is that it does a horrible job for small stakes gambles. Remember when Derek from Veritasium was asking people about flipping and there was loss aversion? Risk aversion does a horrible job of explaining people's decisions there. So that's one thing that Kahneman and Tversky noticed. Another thing is that people are bad with probabilities. People just don't understand the difference between like a 20% probability and 25% probability. And so Kahneman and Tversky put that into prospect theory. What else did they put in prospect theory? They put that people care about their current reference point. They're thinking about things relatively. How much better is this for me? How much worse? They put that into prospect theory. They also put in the fact that people are risk seeking for losses. Why would they do this? Why do people actually want to be more risky with losses? We'll talk about that later. But if you watch my videos and read this paper, it'll be a great primer for us talking about it on Monday. And remember, it's going to be it's going to be an abbreviated class because I sort of think of you watch the videos as a substitute for some of the class. So what we will do on class will be shorter because I will hope that you've watched the videos. And I will post in Blackboard exactly which videos I'd like you to watch. Okay, so I do think now you're ready to start reading the paper on prospect theory, which is already available in Blackboard under readings. There's two. One's called Prospect Theory in the Wild. Don't read that one yet. Just read Prospect Theory, the original, and I might actually have you do a reading response to it. I think maybe just a brief reading response is worthwhile. It's just kind of a way to get you to actually do it. I apologize. I know you guys are adults and you shouldn't need this kind of incentive, but unfortunately, I think maybe some people do, and I can nudge you into reading this paper, the prospect theory paper, by asking you to do what I will consider to be a kind of a short reading response. You know, it doesn't have to be a full page. It can be like one good paragraph is good. You guys have any questions about what's coming up in the class? I'm going to stop recording.